A quorum now being present, we'll start off with item number 8 as consent. I think item 8 will be consent unless I hear otherwise.
Wait. Okay. Unless you hear otherwise. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, and let's start with the Commissioner Designate. If Commissioner Designate Drury, please come forward. We'll do item number 1.
Good morning, John White, City Clerk. Item 1, communication from the Mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Richard E. Druyan to the Board of Police Commissioners.
Good morning. I'm sorry I couldn't talk to you very long the other day, but you got a chance to talk to, I hope, some of the other folks around the building.
I have. Thank you.
Welcome. First of all, congratulations on your designation, and look forward to hopefully concurrent with the committee and the council very shortly. Can you give me an idea? You have a long experience with LAPD. You've been on a number of reviews. Certainly, you know a lot about the department. Is there anything that you consider something you really want to accomplish in this term as a police commissioner?
Well, I want to make sure that the reforms that have been implemented, the provisions of the consent decree that have now been implemented by the department remain in force, and that the department adheres to both the letter and the spirit of the consent decree, and that we continue to move forward the way the department has to make sure that it has enhanced its credibility and maintains its credibility with all of the communities that it serves. So I think as a commissioner, I look at that consent decree as the ideal that we need to attain and continue to attain going forward.
Very good. And certainly our chief has talked about his real vision of constitutional policing, which I think is very laudable and certainly what we want to do. And as a lawyer, for one, as a member of the commission's, Christopher Commission in the past, do you have any idea of things we could do better? Looking at the consent decree, what we did accomplish, things we didn't do?
Well, I haven't studied the department recently the way I did 10 years ago and 20 years ago when I was a member of those commissions. I think that the department is committed to adhering to the reforms that have been implemented. I think Chief Beck is committed to adhering to those as well. I don't know that there's anything I would particularly say that we should be doing better, but I think we need to maintain the vigilance, to maintain the community policing, maintain the commitment to constitutional policing. The department is in a very good position right now. The crime statistics are obviously down. The federal judge who was monitoring the consent decree has determined it is no longer necessary. He's turned back oversight of the department to the Board of Police Commissioners and responsibility for the operation to the chief. So we're in a position right now to continue to enhance the credibility of the department in the eyes of the community. And I think that is the most important thing that the Police Commission needs to do.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Mr. Zine.
Well, you had an impressive resume, sir.
Thank you.
You've obviously put a lot of bad guys in jail from a U.S. attorney's experience. The officers haven't received a pay raise. They're not going to get one next year. The cash overtime was taken away. What, as a police commissioner, what can you do to help keep the morale relatively high with the adverse impact of the economy that's impacting them and their families?
Well, I think one of the things that the Police Commission can do, and that I certainly intend to do, is to go out and meet with the various bureaus and areas, the stations, meet with the officers, get to know them, get to understand their problems, make sure that they recognize that they have a voice through the Police Commission, that people understand the difficulties that they're operating under, and that there's support for the police officers from the Commission. So that is certainly, I think when people are working in tough times, to know that there are people at the Chief Beck, and the commissioners are behind them and supporting them and understand their problems, I think that can do a lot for morale. It can't solve the problem. It's not going to solve the budget problem, but certainly showing that we do support them and we are behind them can help.
And that does matter. They know that someone cares. So I would encourage you that with the 21 divisions, as many as you can visit, because that impact ripples through the entire organization. So I would encourage you, with that trend, they sometimes feel no one cares.
I understand that, and that is something I certainly intend to do, to try to get out there and meet as many people as I can, and to understand the problems the officers are facing.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Perry?
Yeah. I,
One.
no, I'm fine.
Okay. Commissioner, one last request to you, and I had voted at one time against Commissioner Orton, not because I disliked her or anything like that. I actually liked her a lot. I had felt that in the latter years that the police commission had become too much of a rubber stamp for Chief Bratton. And while I love Chief Beck, Dennis and I weren't particularly great friends with Chief Bratton, but I love Chief Beck. I think he's going to be a great chief. I do ask one thing, and that is the commissioner's question. Don't just assume that everything you hear from staff or the chief is the right answer. I want you to question. And then if you feel he was right, go ahead and vote with him. But I just want the commission to challenge sometimes and question everything. Mr. Zine and I had gone to the commission a couple of years ago on the issue of the red light enforcement program, questioned everything. The police commission did nothing but rubber stamp it. The company went bankrupt just as he and I predicted. We're in a quagmire over how that's to be run now. So I think all Mr. Zine and I ever asked for is that the commissioners logically think through things and ask questions and then come to determination. And so that's all I ask of you. You don't need to say yes or no. That's a request. So.
I happen to agree with you, Councilmember Smith. That is the most important function for the Board of Police Commissioners, to ask the right questions, to get the answers. By doing that, by making it clear that the department is subject to that kind of oversight and that questioning, in the end, we will get the right answers and we'll get to enhance the credibility of the department. So I do think that is the most important function for the Board of Police Commissioners.
Thank you very much. And we'll be a better department for it, too. Thank you. Without any further objection, that we move unanimously to the council. We appreciate your being here this morning. Look forward to seeing you in council. Do we have a date for that, John?
Yes, we do. Mr. Drew is scheduled for council Wednesday morning.
Wednesday morning.
I think that's going to wind up getting moved.
Okay.
Because I have to be unfortunately, Dallas, Texas, which I don't want to be, but
Yeah.
I hope to be able to be before the council anytime next week.
Very good. We'll look forward to that. Sir, thank you very much for your attendance. Good luck with your position. Thank you. That concludes item number one. Council committee, we have a item, it's a closed session item. Should be relatively brief, though. If we could adjourn to the back channel 9. Item 9.
Adjourn to the back.
We'll go to the back room, let the folks stay here for a few minutes. It shouldn't be long.
Okay.
If the city attorney would read the relevant section.
I'll read it. The item 9, city attorney report relative to settlement in the case entitled Luis Navarrete et al. Versus City of Los Angeles Superior Court case number BS 118424. The city attorney requests closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9A to allow the committee to confer with its legal counsel on this matter.
With that, folks, you can sit here. We'll be back in just hopefully a few minutes. Okay, that concludes the executive session item. That was item number 9. The committee voted to support the recommendation of the city attorney. So let's go back to the regular session. With no objection, we're going to continue item number 5. And item number 2 will be consented as well as number, whatever the other one was, number 8. So add number
2 to the consent.
consent, right. And we'll get back on the agenda to item number 3.
Council members, so again, we're continuing item 5, approving item 2. Was there another item you're approving besides, in addition to those?
Well, originally, we had taken item 8 as consent and add number 2 as consent,
Okay,
and then 5 was continued.
thank you.
All right.
That will take you to item 3, motion Alarcon Rizar relative to modifying the 2007 Urban Area Security Initiative grant budget to transfer $121,510 from the contractual services to the Emergency Management Department.
Morning. The heck with that, when's the next earthquake?
We just had one, Council.
Yeah, I know.
24 hours.
Good morning. Jim Featherstone, General Manager, Emergency Management Department. What you have before you in this motion is requesting approval to reallocate money from the UASI, 2007 UASI Urban Area Security Initiative grant to cover the salary of 2 emergency preparedness coordinators through September. This grant would dovetail with the successor grants that we already we're waiting on approval for. We're still waiting on approval from the 09 grant also. So we anticipate with the approval of this reallocation and then a subsequent grant to be able to provide support, salary and fringe support for 2 emergency preparedness coordinators. Otherwise, they'll be subject to the layoffs. Okay. Now, the only question I have is, when you say you've covered them with the general fund, from the general fund, and related costs, you said all related costs or just fringe? When you said fringe, what did you mean? Pension?
Just the fringe. From the UASI grant, it does allow for salaries and fringe benefits. The subsequent grants, we do also allow for salary and fringe, and we'll be working on any other grants that require a match to ensure with the CAO that those matches are met through either fringe and other support costs that the department has already incurred.
And when you say fringe, because I want to make sure we're talking the same language here, are you talking about what the CAO considers fringe, which is also administrative costs for the building and lights, or just the administrative costs for the pension and health benefits?
Just the direct health and other benefits, not all of the administrative.
Very good. And I'm fine with that, by the way. I always thought we need to differentiate these when we look at these sometimes, but very good. Thank you. Mr. Furness?
Yeah, in what format do we have confirmation that this change is okay with the grantor?
We have already received approval from the state that reallocating these program monies from contract to personnel has been approved.
But in what format? Email, phone call, certified letter? I mean, what?
Through the Mayor's Office of Homeland Security. I'm not sure specific to this if it was a letter or an email, but either of those are sufficient from the grantor's perspective in the Mayor's office.
Okay, well, before we go to council, if you could let us know in what format that was done. There's a lot of changes going on with personnel at every level of government. The last thing I would want to find out is later on that we have to backfill some of this because there was a snafu and, you know, so-and-so's been there for 20 years and all of a sudden she's gone and they can't confirm and they just get hard-nosed with us and just say, nope, it's not okay with us. Let's just make sure we have it firm and in the file.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Zine?
No questions.
Ms. Perry? I have just one question for the mayor's office. Obviously, they were planning for this to be diminished. We say we're putting it back in. Is this going to be captured in the budget, or are we going to have this discussion again in the budget, whether these are funded and captured in the 10-11 budget?
Good morning, Eileen Decker from the Mayor's Office. The grant funding can fund the particular individuals, the 2 positions, through, as was stated earlier, through September. By that time, before council should be our 09 UASI grants, and that can pick up the funding for those 2 individuals. So we anticipate it will be seamless grant funding.
Very good.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's what I
Councilman?
wanted, just make sure that this was seamlessly carried through the budget process, that we don't have to have another discussion in 4 weeks on this, so.
That would be our hope as well.
Very good. All right, thank you very much. Without any objection, then, we'll move this to council for approval. Thank you very much. Thank you. And on to item number 4.
On that one.
Item 4, City Attorney to present a verbal report relative to the actions required to establish the Los Angeles Fire Department Foundation and discussion regarding why a previous effort to establish a foundation did not proceed.
Hey, this was something that Ms. Perry has brought forward and has been very involved in this, so I will turn the microphone over to Ms. Perry to lead the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Several years ago, a group of individuals came together to form a fire department foundation, and they talked with and negotiated and discussed with the city attorney's office for over 2 years, and I'm not sure where the breakdown occurred, but it seems that discussions have disintegrated. It's unfortunate for all involved, the city, the foundation, potential foundation, and the department also. So I asked the city attorney's office to come in and report this to committee so we can understand the process, what took place, how you go through forming a foundation, but in this case, specifically what took place, as well as the MOU, the trademark agreements, and specifically why this agreement did not come to fruition. And then we have a number of cards here, but I think what's best is to let the city attorney go first, and then call the folks up to let them speak on the record.
Good morning, council members. I'm Janet Jackson, Deputy City Attorney, and I am one of the city attorneys that advises the Los Angeles Fire Department, and I was involved with this particular issue. You have asked our office to respond on 2 matters. The first matter, action necessary to establish an LAFD foundation. Specifically, to establish a foundation as a fundraising foundation for any branch of any department does not require any action from the department per se. Any entity can form a 501(c) and become a fundraising entity, and they can make a city department the beneficiary of their efforts. It is up to the city department to decide whether or not to accept those gifts. So to answer the first question, there are no specific requirements for the creation of the foundation because it is an independent entity outside of the city. Specifically, with respect to the LAFD Foundation, the fire department, as early as 2007, began negotiations with a group of concerned citizens regarding efforts to become a foundation for the sole purpose of, or one of its main purpose of supporting the fire department. And as part of that process, which has started under Chief Bamatri, he began negotiations with a group of these involved citizens. And that same mission was continued under the next fire chief, Chief Berry. Both chiefs sought advice from the city attorney's office regarding specific questions on a relationship with the foundation, and I became involved with that advice. Our recommendation was, before the department entered into a relationship with the foundation, they should formalize that agreement through an MOA. The purpose of the MOA, although not legally required under the charter or the ad code, was to provide specific terms and guidelines. If the foundation desired to utilize any of the city's marks or trademarks, it is necessary for them to enter into a copyright agreement and a trademark agreement, and that's done through a different branch of the city attorney's office, where we have an intellectual property specialist attorney. And this foundation so desired to do that. So specifically, we began negotiations with the foundation through its legal counsel, which was Kay Schuler, to enter into an MOA. It ended up becoming a very negotiated issue and it lasted for approximately 5 months. The issues that caused the length of the negotiations there were 6 major issues that Kay Schuler had objection to finding what is a standard or a template that the city attorney's office often uses for foundations, which is analogous to what the library foundation has used. In this particular negotiations, the issues involve the exclusivity of the foundation, the execution of a trademark agreement, the term of the agreement, the limitation of overhead, the submission of financial statements, the agreement for the length of the term, 1 year versus 3, disposition of funds upon termination, and indemnification. Each of those specific issues resulted in a lot of negotiations. Finally, at the end of 5 months, we were able to enter into an agreement with the LAFD Foundation, and a MOA was executed. And that part of the provisions of the MOA required that the foundation, if it desired to use the marks of the city, such as fundraising, a picture of the badge or the department, that they would be required to enter into a trademark agreement with the city. Trademark agreement negotiations ensued and lasted approximately 12 months. The foundation's attorney did not desire to sign what is our standard, the standard agreement that attorney Phil Lamb, our intellectual properties attorneys, uses, and they negotiated a series of changes in that agreement, and which is why it took approximately 12 months. At the conclusion of that 12 months negotiation, the matter was put on the agenda for the Board of Fire Commissioners. During the first attempt, when it was put on, the first attempt that the commission had to observe the trademark agreement, they had some questions and objections, took the matter off calendar, and did not vote on it. In between the time that the matter came back up for approval with the Board of Fire Commissioners, the Board of Fire Commissioners and the fire chief, and as well as many of the members of City Council, received a letter from the foundation where they, in fact, terminated the MOU. They were the ones that terminated with the city, indicating that the process had been too long and too exhausting for them. And I'm prepared to answer any questions you might have.
The chief of staff.
I have one for the attorney. Did the agreement that was brought forward to this foundation reflect the same agreement we have with the police foundation? Was it the same basic contract or agreements on?
No, it was not.
What? Okay, why was it different then?
The relationship with the police predates our practice of using agreements, and I would defer to counsel for the police department, but I don't believe that there is an MOU between the police foundation and the police foundation and the city. There is one with the library foundation.
Okay. And then it's reflective to that agreement, the library?
It is similar. There are some key matters which it does not contain. One of the key matters is that there is no limitation on the amount of overhead costs that the foundation could charge or offset their fundraising. For example, they could fundraise $10 and use 9 of those dollars towards administrative costs.
But under state law, you have to disclose that anyway when you, and that's
Under city ordinance, too.
city ordinance too, so people would know that what they're giving.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
The Plaza and the Police Foundation, how many other foundations are there with the city family?
I'm not aware of any other foundations
So there's just the
that have been solidified through the formal agreement other than the Library Foundation, and there's approximately 80 friends groups
Friends of the Library,
Friends of the Library Group, and the La Raza Agreement.
the Plaza for the zoo. And do they comply with the requirements? Because I can understand if there's no limit on what they could generate for overhead, how it could go down the wrong track. So I think there has to be some governance on that. You say the Police Foundation doesn't have that, though?
I don't believe there's a formal agreement with the Police Foundation. I was not able to find one.
So their administrative costs could be what's raised.
Correct.
which
That
could
is
be
correct.
Could be a problem. Mr. Tiefenk. Now we open up another question. With the Police Foundation, on the administrative costs, is there any review or any oversight? Or if they raise $1 million and it's $750,000 to run the organization?
The only review that would take place is as a 501c3, they would have to submit their documents to the Secretary of State, and also any charitable activity that they take within the city would be as any 501c3. They would have to apply to the Board of Police Commissioners, Charitable Services section. We then issue a placard or a number for them to solicit for that particular event, and then they have to provide a response back as to the monies that they raised and the monies where they go. So there is a process to track that internally, and that's for any organization in the city of Los Angeles that's a 501c3 that does solicitation in the city.
Well, the question with the fire department is the foundation folks didn't want to comply with that, but is the 501c3 then required that they do that?
To be a 501c3, you get that from the state of California, and then you would have to do any solicitation in the city. As you'll see in anything you receive at home, you'll have this small little white piece of paper, and then that indicates that they are authorized to solicit within the city of L.A. We also do that with a variety of activities that occur within LAPD. If you see on the LAPD website, there occasionally will be charitable fundraisers for individual events. Well, if they are a charitable fundraiser, they have to have a card from the Board of Police Commissioners to do that. They have to report where the money goes. It's as the LAPD Badge Foundation does an annual event. All of those type of events have to have that. So if any organization, whether they had an MOA or not with a respective department in the city, did a 501c3 solicitation in the city, they would be required to comply with those.
Does that show how much the expense? It shows the expense in
Yes, sir.
addition to what they anticipate raising.
Exactly right.
And the percentage and how much that percentage would be of the total that.
That's correct. And if they don't file the appropriate documents with us and with the state, they will be suspended from being a 501c3 until they do come in compliance.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the way it works is when a 501c3 is soliciting within the city of Los Angeles by city ordinance, they are required to get a permit. However, when they do get a permit, they are asked to disclose the last event that they had within the city, and then they're required to disclose how much they raised to the dollar and how much they spent on the event to the dollar. For example, if an organization raised $121,000 at last year's event, and then they put invites out or announce this coming event, you will see on that with the city permit, it says last year they raised $121,000 and then they spent $17,500. It has those two numbers on it, nothing more. If they do violate the city ordinance, they do not violate the rights within the state. That is a city ordinance.
That's correct, sir.
So the state is separate. The state, they're required to file their annual returns, et cetera. But question to the city attorney's office is, what is it that's so complicated about the process that is item number 4 on this agenda? As you said in your opening remarks, a 501c3 can create a 501c3. It's none of the city's business if they're going to create a 501c3. They just go to the state, they get their number, they get their federal number, and they're a 501c3. What's so complicated about this particular matter with the fire department?
I don't believe that this matter is particularly complicated, but for the fact that the fire department desired to have the foundation enter into a memorandum of agreement and had certain terms and conditions that they wanted contained in that agreement.
Now, in these negotiations that were 5 months and 12 months long or what have you, what was it that the fire department was asking of this organization that didn't seem to be agreeable?
The fire department asked that 70% of money that was raised go to the donations and no more than 30%
For fundraising, overhead, et cetera.
That was one of the issues.
And hold on. So that was one of the issues that was requested, the fire department requested of this organization that wants to have a relationship with our LA City Fire Department
Correct.
as a philanthropic organization. Now, what was the organization's answer on that point? They said, no, thank you, we're not going to comply with that. And since they said we weren't going to comply with that, then the city said, okay, then we don't have an agreement.
No, the fire department desired to have a relationship with the foundation and made a concession in that area, as they did with other areas,
Okay, what was that concession?
that there was no limit on the overhead cost.
Oh, really?
Yes.
The fire department agreed to that?
Who's representing the fire department right now? Who can address that on behalf of the fire department? Because you work for the city attorney.
I
right?
do.
You're here to talk for the fire department?
Don Fraser, Chief of Staff, but however, I'm not prepared to comment on that specific issue. I believe that's something that the city attorney would be better prepared to answer.
Okay, then back to the city attorney's office. So it's the city attorney's office understanding that when that was one of the terms that the city fire department wanted in order to have this philanthropic relationship with this 501c3, when the 501c3 said, no thanks, we're not going to do 70-30, we don't want to be confined to those percentages, the fire department's answer to them was, okay.
That's correct.
And the city attorney's office opinion in that, at that point in time was not a good idea?
That's correct.
And then when the city attorney's office told the fire department that's not a good idea, then what happened?
The client desired to go forward with it.
The fire department desired to go forward. So in other words, the fire department told the city attorney's office pretty much, well, thanks for your advice, we still want to do this, and we don't care to have a percentage limit on how much they can spend on overhead and fundraising, et cetera.
In short, yes, although the department, I believe, was convinced that through the relationship with the foundation, that the foundation would, in fact, donate the higher percentage of their fundraising dollars. They had a trust level with the foundation.
No wonder this is taking so long. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, foundation people come and go.
No,
LA City Fire Department.
but the problem is, the last thing we need in the city is a scandal that they had a big gala dinner and they announced that they raised $1.2 million, and then they just turned over $300,000 to the fire department for equipment and life-saving doodads or whatever they do with that money. And all of a sudden, you know, the LA Times, the Daily News, and even CNN comes in and has a wonderful time talking about how they spent $900,000 fooling people into thinking that it was going to go to the fire department, and only $300,000 made it. So I think that those kinds of limitations should be in any agreement, especially if they're going to be using our logos or if they're going to have such a formal, relationship. It'd be different if a 501c3 was not looking for a formal relationship. They went ahead and had their own fundraiser, and, say in January, and then all of a sudden in May, when they collected all the money, they said, here's a check for $300,000. Well, how they raised that money or what have you, based on their event in January, really is not a formal relationship. We say, thank you very much, I hope it's clean money, and we pass it through the council and accept it as a gift if we choose to do so, and, well, hallelujah. The department has $300,000 and, do good things with it. But this is something where this organization wants to be identified as an organization that is connected with the fire department of the city of Los Angeles, correct?
That is correct.
I would ask Ms. Perry, because of your concern involvement, which way you see this going.
Well, I want the folks to come up and speak. We have 4 speaker cards. Let's hear what they have to say. And then we can proceed. I'm going to call them all up at once.
Well, anyway.
Lynn McEwen Cohen, Russ Ashton, Elizabeth Sluter,
What was it?
and Nikki Azhari. Is Nikki Azhari here? And then is Russ here?
No. Russ is not available.
Okay. All right. Please. Go ahead. Yeah.
Good morning. I come before you today as a citizen of the City of Los Angeles, but also as a board member of the LAFD Foundation and president of the Miracle Mile Civic Coalition. I'll pass to you in a little bit some information about the Civic Coalition because I think it's relevant to the issue with the LAFD Foundation since some of the people are connected to both organizations. The Civic Coalition works in the spirit of cooperation with the community, trying to work with a public-private partnership with their local fire stations. We think it's very important for the local fire stations and the citizens to work together. We're very serious about emergency preparedness. We're very serious about resilience. After 33 months, we're here with you this morning, and we have tirelessly tried to work with the help of 2 fire chiefs to complete the startup of the LAFD Foundation. The mission was simple, just raise friends and funds for the Los Angeles Fire Department citywide. With 9/11, terrorism, Katrina, the projected 2013 perhaps $900 million budget, the fire department's $56 million shortfall, the brownouts, Haiti, and of course yesterday, our 7.2 earthquake. We are here today wondering what could possibly be so complicated about raising friends for the fire department when there's an emergency of unprecedented crisis of fiscal import. And so we're here with you today to try to find out why it is that good citizens work tirelessly with a fine law firm with a great track record over a period now almost 3 years to try to have a foundation for the fire department, and we were not able to do so. In the Miracle Mile, we have raised about $80,000 for our local fire station. We think that the citizens across Los Angeles for the 106 fire stations are very capable. May I continue?
You want to give her 1 more minute? Okay, 1 more minute.
Thank you. Are very capable at the grassroots level to get involved with their local fire station. This is just not about money, because as you know, in an emergency, when you have to get together when something very bad has happened, you're going to go to your local fire station, you're going to bring the friendship that you already have and the relationships that you already have to hit the ground running together. So it's a money issue, but it's also this grassroots level of adopt a fire station. We're very concerned about the inner city and having a sister station program in the inner city. This is a program that the fire department already has, and it's one that the foundation wanted to use in conjunction with the fundraising. So what you're looking at today, in our opinion, is a tip of the iceberg. We don't know exactly what happened. We still don't know the status of what's happening. I think that it's important that if there are rules that their MOAs should be followed, that everybody should follow them, police, fire, whatever. But what's very important, you all have the power in your hands to make sure that this is a transparent process. This is very important that it is. If not, we're not ever going to really get where we need to go. I think it's very important that we come together. We wish anyone well who wants to bring their strengths to the fire department table. But what this comes down to is council district by council district. Each one of you has passion for your fire department and for your citizens and for emergency preparedness. We can do this with your help at your level. So we will work independently, the way we always have with our local fire station, Battalion 18. But I urge you to join hands with your citizens, with your fire departments, raise funds, but also raise relationships, because in an emergency we're going to need each other. And right now, as you can hear from this morning, there are some really serious questions that you're asking this morning, and we don't have answers to them. So we're counting on you to please help us. I don't know if it's because it's Passover or it's Easter or we all just have some spring fever, but I do think it's time to say enough is enough, and we just simply have to stop wondering what's going on. We need to find out what's going on and build on that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Labange is here. He wants to speak on this item, so we'll give him a professional courtesy. Stay there and, let him speak.
Morning. Mr. Perry, Mr. Smith, Mr. Carter, Mr. Zine. Community involvement is key, as you know, to anything. I'm not preaching to the choir, and what a nice-looking choir, except for Mr. Zine, it is.
Just don't ask us to sing.
That's right. But the constant here is the fire department. The fire department is responsible for its community organizations. And I've worked for a long time with Ms. Cohen on a variety of issues. She's one of the best citizens in Los Angeles. And I say that for your devotion. But at the same time, the fire chief, over a series of chiefs now, has tried to get this established foundation. We know the Library Foundation and its success. The Recreation of Parks has a foundation. It is moving. Other agencies are trying to create foundations. I'm going to personally, Ms. Cohen, leave it up to the fire department to choose the best way it should go forward as it establishes its foundation. One of the challenges, it has taken long for this to come forward, and now it's taken this time, and we're here. But sometimes, and I just say this to you right out, Lynn, sometimes those who go first over the hill get there at the time, but someone else has to go over the next hill to get there at another point. And the concept, do you understand that?
Yeah, because the first guy gets shot.
Well, come on. Don't say that. You should say that. Well, no, I was thinking of runners. I just met with LA Unified in their after-school program and their cross-country team.
Okay.
So I know, oh, you could make that. Yeah, thank you very much. So I would like to hear from the fire department, truly, on this here. I know a lot of work has been done, Lynn, on this here, but we have to count on this after our time. Whatever our time is here, we try to bring the highest level of service to the people of Los Angeles. But there should be an established program like the Police Foundation that is separate and lives beyond whoever the chief of police is, whoever the fire chief is, whoever the head of Parks Department. Thank you very much. You weren't a cross-country runner, were you, Mr. Smith? Okay.
Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Sluter. I work with the law firm of Kay Scholler, and we represent the foundation. Primarily, I'm here today to support the foundation and vet what they have to say as to the events of what occurred in the negotiations. I can also say that Ms. Jackson's account of what occurred is for the most part correct. The foundation does consist of 5 committed individuals, citizens of the city of Los Angeles. Really, things broke down when it came to the trademark agreement. The foundation, signed the trademark agreement in March 2008 and submitted that to Ms. Jackson's office. At that time, Ms. Jackson worked with us and got it on the fire commissioner's meeting calendar. And then through subsequent delays, the council meetings or the commission meetings just kept getting delayed. And in May, we learned that Commissioner Hudley Hayes had additional concerns. The concerns that were relayed to me were the overhead issue, which Ms. Jackson mentioned, as well as the concern that all of the donations to the foundation might not be used for the LAFD. That second point was sort of taken off the table because it was very clear in our articles that we were committed solely to the fire department. With respect to the overhead issue, though, we stated that we were willing to accept a 30% overhead cap on the first year and a 20% overhead cap every year thereafter. That was communicated in a phone call, and it was followed up by an email from a city attorney, not Ms. Jackson, another person, to me around June 15th of 2008. I then relayed that email to Ms. Jackson around August 26th. I did not hear back from either Ms. Jackson or the other city attorney after that point. So it's the first time I've heard that there was an offer that there would be no cap on overhead. That's it.
Okay, Ms. Nikki Azhari. Oh, all right, okay. Pat McCosker.
Thank you. Good morning, council members. Pat McCosker, President, United Firefighters of Los Angeles City. We've had for 15 years or so now an Adopt a Fire Station program that's been very, helpful. I've been back in office for about the last year and a half, and for that whole time, I've been getting, at every monthly meeting, I've been getting complaints from firefighters saying, why doesn't the Adopt a Fire Station program work anymore? We make legitimate requests to fix our dilapidated kitchen or repair the extractor that takes the chemicals out of our turnout coats, those kinds of things. We can't get the money from the city anymore. The city's in a financial crisis, and it would sure be nice if the Adopt a Fire Station program would work like it used to, but it's completely bogged down. We can't get a request approved when we go through the normal channels and ask for legitimate things. I've been inquiring for the last year and a half of the department, why is that so? What's happened here? And can we fix it? And to be honest with you, I got more answers and more insight this morning listening to the testimony here about why that is than I've gotten with all those inquiries. So I think that we have a real problem here that is impacting firefighters and fire stations. We need to fix it, repair it, so that we can get those legitimate requests. You know, people are willing to make donations to the fire department. Those donations that they're willing to make ought to then get to firefighters and fire stations to help them in their duties and their job and their working conditions. So I would urge you to oversee the department and fix this problem because it's been going on for far too long. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have a question. Mr. McCosker, thank you for your testimony, and I learned a lot more in 10, 15 minutes talking about this than I knew about it over the last few years. But how do you feel about what you heard this morning when it comes to whether or not an organization can have such a formal relationship with our fire department and yet not come to terms with having an unfettered ability to raise money and not having some semblance of a responsible percentage that they need to account for? Don't you think that that's a legitimate thing that should be agreed upon before we go forward with a formal agreement?
What I heard here this morning is very troubling. I can't believe that the agreement doesn't specify that some percentage is going to go directly to where it's intended. When people give money, they ought to be able to give it with confidence.
Especially if they're using our logo and the relationship obviously appears very formal and very direct.
Absolutely, I agree.
Thank you.
I've got a couple comments on this. There's an annual event they have downtown, Hope for Firefighters.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that money go?
That goes to the Widows and Orphans Fund, I believe, of our Los Angeles Firemen's Relief Association, so it's a different program.
Okay. Now, we have in my district, Warner Center, through Douglas Emmett, an event, Brave Somebody, I forgot the exact title, but all the businesses contribute to this. They block off the street, similar to what they have downtown.
Benefits for the brave.
Bravehearts, thank you, Bravehearts. That money then goes to the fire stations in Battalion 3 for exactly what you're saying, things that the firefighters need. And there's a lady and a husband, Valley Inn restaurant on Ventura and Sherman Oaks Avenue, Sophia and Boris, and they've had for many years the same situation where they take care of Station 88 and some other stations without a foundation. So there's still their current programs in place, 3 that I know of, that do exactly what we need. The foundation, I thought the foundation would be an overall foundation, have a big event, generate dollars. But if you're talking about individual communities supporting their fire station, like 69 Pacific Palisades, they do things for their firefighters. Those programs, I understand, are still in place. This foundation, to me, like the police department foundation, that is for the chief of police to use as he sees fit for training or et cetera, citywide. Each of the 21 police stations, they have an Officer Appreciation Day where the community puts it together. I know SOLA up in Devonshire. So the different activities, I think, are still happening. The question, I think, on this foundation, if this is going to be a citywide and the dollars are going to be put into a fund, whether it's 20% or 30% for overhead, then the fire chief decides how that money is going to be spent. But as far as individual stations, I'm sure around the city, there are many folks that are contributing, whether it's a barbecue or something, to help their local fire stations. This foundation, to me, is a much broader scale, much larger scale, and the money would then go to the fire chief or his designee to appropriate, different than what we see happening on a local level. Am I correct?
You're correct, and I got to say that generosity, that charity in individual neighborhoods is very much appreciated. But the reason that Adopt a Fire Station program or the foundation is so necessary is because there are many communities in L.A. where they would like to be that generous to their fire department, but they can't afford to. Right. The problem for a long time for us was places like Fire Station 69 in Pacific Palisades. the community would come in very generously and rebuild the kitchen and do it all up nice. And the guys would have great working conditions there. And then in South LA, they couldn't afford it. And the guys had, substandard conditions there. So the foundation is fantastic. Adoptive Fire Station is fantastic because the money goes in and the requests are then approved on the basis of need.
So it seems like the only issue we have is what dollars, what percent's going to be for administrative. That seems to me the only question that remains. Is it going to be unlimited or is there going to be a cap on it?
And getting it moving. I mean, it's been bogged down for a long time now. So.
And if I could just add to that, I believe that, we terminated our agreement because we felt that we could not serve the city of Los Angeles under the rules that were being placed on us when there was no response even to our agreement to do a cap. We just thought that seems to make such common sense to us. So certainly, whatever goes forward with whoever does a foundation for the city, of course there should be a cap. We agreed to it. No one ever responded to us about that. I believe that there's another group that wants to do a foundation. We certainly wish them well. We've met with the person who wants to do that and wish them well. They are not interested at all in the Adopt a Fire Station program. They're not interested in the grassroots level. That's our focus. We think that's critically important, and I'm delighted that you're here today speaking on behalf of that. So I think it's very important that anyone who wants to help this city is allowed to do so. But both fire chiefs came to us and said they only wanted one foundation. They wanted to essentially get rid of all the other firefighting fundraisers that there were and have the foundation oversee everything. That was the goal. And in addition, they wanted the foundation to oversee all the Adopt a Fire Station funds. Now, there's currently about $250,000 that the California Community Foundation has in accounts for the fire stations that have Adopt a Fire Stations accounts. Fire Station 61, for example, has about $4,000 left of the $25,000 we raised for them. That money is, as he was saying, it's frozen. They can't get it. So the current thinking right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone from the fire department, but I believe with the Adopt a Fire Station, if you want to write a check to the fire department, you really can't do that. What they want now is in-kind services only because that's all that they can handle. But, gee, it would be nice if someone wants to give us money that we could take it. So we've got some work to do. I mean, we are the city of the angels. We certainly can do better than we have. But that was the intent. So I don't know. I think that this grassroots level, this Adopt a Fire Station thing is profoundly important. And I do think it has an implication with emergency preparedness.
If I could just hear from the chief, because I said work with Lynn over the years, is Jan Perry has. Jan's a former president of the Miracle Mile Neighborhood Association years ago when Jan lived in the Miracle Mile. And hear from the fire department to try to make the right decision for all of us.
Ms. Cohn, can I ask one question? You said the department or the chiefs said they wanted one foundation, an umbrella of everything.
Yes.
Which is not what the police department does.
Right.
Who specifically said that?
Well, originally it was Chief Bamatri, and then followed by that Chief Barry. And Chief Barry worked absolutely tirelessly the whole time he was there with us. I just can't tell you how much, and working with the Fire Commission as well. There was some concerns with the Fire Commission. There was some illness there, which I think delayed things a little bit. However, what we were trying to do is what we've tried to do since 9/11. That is, help the fire department the way they say they want to be helped. That only seems reasonable. And so we would try, as Ms. Jackson said too today, we try to be very accommodating about what it is they want. Then you have to follow the rules. And so we're happy to follow the rules. We've always followed the rules. But when the rules are so complicated and it takes so long, it's almost like fiddling while Rome is burning just a little bit.
In all offense, the rules don't seem that complicated.
They're not.
Similar rules that we've put on other foundations. When you look at the police department, while the main foundation doesn't have it, every one of the divisional foundations do have those rules. So I don't think it's all that complicated. And it sounds to me like you're making it more complicated than it is. But I don't understand why the fire department would only want one foundation and an umbrella for everything either. So
I would like to respond to the exclusivity of the foundation. That was one of the issues that we also negotiated very early on as we helped legal counsel for the foundation understand that that was not on the table. You cannot have an exclusive foundation without some type of procurement process. And
Well, you could.
if in
You
fact,
could have an exclusive foundation if that's what the department really wanted,
But it
and
gets more
exclude.
complicated.
Yeah, but that becomes much more problematic by excluding everything else then, or saying you're now subservient to this one commission, one foundation. I mean, you could do that. I'm not so sure that's the best way to do it, but you could.
in any event, it was taken off the table by Chief Berry.
We were also, frankly, very uncomfortable with taking people like Sophie, who have an incredible track record, you know, to say that you can't do it anymore. It has to come. We didn't like that ever, you know, so we thought being authorized was a much better way to go.
Okay, so, Mr.
Well,
Zine.
Maybe the chief has some response.
Let me just bring up a couple of things. First of all, somebody writing a check to the LAFD, we accept those checks every day. We do have funds that are tied up, as has been spoken here at the committee, and we are moving forward on a new foundation. That foundation will have an approved agreement that will be approved by the Board of Fire Commissioners. At this time, we have no formal agreement with any group, and we would not limit ourselves to just one foundation. We would accept multiple foundations. So.
Okay, anybody else?
And I'd just like to say, if I'm ever the first one over the hill, I plan to wear body armor.
Oh, well, now, I don't want to correct myself. I feel bad, because Lynn Cohen is a spirited citizen, and I helped Lynn, and Lynn did work for me at a part-time basis at a certain point, and did encourage her to create relationships with community. But also, I do believe in the process that one day we're here, and there should be a process that should be very transparent, that would be received. And having word been said, Lynn, that the chief engineer of the Los Angeles City Fire Department wanted to go in this direction, consulting with the city attorney, I felt that was the best way to go. Not to take anything away from your dedication and spirit here, but this is what happens. We're trying to do the same thing in some of the other departments as well.
Anybody else? Okay. It seems to me that there's two possible pathways here. One is Ms. Cohen and her group are an established 501c3, is that correct?
Right.
And they operate independent of the city, and they can continue to do that. Is there a signed MOA with a group yet?
There is not a signed MOA with any fundraising arm of the city.
So there's
fire
Ms.
department.
Cohen's group, and then there's another group coming in? Is there another, somebody?
There is another group that is coming in.
And then what's the other group?
I don't have a title for that group, but it'd be
Well,
a foundation group.
How do we identify them?
The other group.
Well, a little more specifically, so we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Do you know who's in the other group?
Number two, I guess.
Do you know who's in the other group?
I don't have, there's two members from the first foundation that have teamed up.
Can you tell, you know what, don't, please, just tell me, don't make me drag this, just tell me.
So the second group includes former Fire Commissioner Jay Groden. So we'll talk in loose terms as the Groden Group.
Uh-huh. You said there's two people?
Yes, there's two people from this first group that have joined and will be moving over. I don't have their name now.
Can I just say, Ms. Perry, just one thing?
Yeah.
You know, libraries have friends groups.
Yeah.
There's a Friends of Fire Stations that should be locally based and done. There's a Friends of 29s, there's a Friends of 56.
Yeah, no, I understand.
You got all that.
Yeah.
But on the big picture here, we don't want to stop that small entrepreneurial citizenry.
Yeah, nobody's, I'm just
Got
trying
it.
to get to the bottom of what the story is here. What if, did you, okay, so there was an outstanding agreement with the first group, for lack of a better word, the Cohen Group, and it was never responded to by the city attorney?
There was a signed MOA agreement.
Okay, so it was fully executed?
It was fully executed, and that was terminated by the group. It was terminated during the or during the final stages of the trademark agreement, which had already been finalized and had already been placed on the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. During that time, I believe subsequent negotiations were entertained between the attorneys and our intellectual properties attorneys. But at this point, the Board of Fire Commissioners already had the agreement and already had some strong concerns about the nature of the relationship that they wanted sunshined at the meeting. One of the issues was the overhead and the limit on the amount that could be charged. The other issue was also on the term of the agreement, which was 3 years, and a strong concern was also the submission of financial statements.
All right, so go back to the first point. So what was the group's position and what was the commission's position?
The commission's position was that there should be some overhead limits on the amount of money that could...
What's the standard limit?
It had not been determined, and the commission did not...
What do they, like library, foundation, what do they do?
2080.
2080, okay, and did this group agree to that?
The group subsequently made a proposed change. This is after the matter had already been submitted to the Board of Fire Commissioners, which was no longer in the hands of...
So they modify the agreement after it had been executed?
It had not been executed.
Okay, and now I'm confused. Did a fully executed agreement go to the Fire Commission?
It was not executed. Before it can be executed,
Okay, so wait, let me back up. When was the agreement fully executed?
The agreement was not fully
Okay,
executed.
because I'm confused. 'Cause I thought you said
Signed but not approved.
it was signed but not fully executed.
There is an MOA and there is a trademark agreement.
All right. So
The MOA was fully executed.
but
The trademark
was
agreement
not.
needed, before it could be signed, it needed approval by the Board of Fire
Okay,
Commissioners.
so the 2080, which is standard operating practice for the city, pursuant to the MOA,
The MOA indicated no overhead.
okay. Did you
The
want to-
proposed change in the trademark agreement would have been to change that provision,
To what?
80/20.
80/20, which is, sounds like 2080 or?
Yes, it's the same one I just said.
Same thing.
Yes.
Okay.
I agree with what Ms. Jackson said. We, the foundation, executed the trademark agreement in March 2008. In May 2008, Ms. Jackson informed me of the fire commissioner's concerns. At that time, in around June 15th, 2008, I had a conversation with City Attorney Bls Lamb. The foundation proposed a 30% cap on overhead for the first year and a 20% cap on overhead for every year thereafter.
And why did you need to deviate at all?
We expressed to Mr. Lamb that during the first year, we were a startup and we just didn't know what the overhead would be.
Okay. And the second point? The commission's second point?
The second point was the financial statement.
So what did the commission want?
The commission wanted annual financial statements submitted to the department and to the board.
And did the group agree to that?
That matter did not come up before the board because they terminated before it could. They would not agree to it in the MOA, in the initial MOA.
That's incorrect. In the MOA, we agreed to annual audited statements, and that, again, is the fully executed document.
Audited or just a statement? Because there's a
We were
difference.
giving audited statements.
Better yet.
Okay, third point? The last point?
The term was the term of 1 year versus 3 years.
Okay, and what did the commission want?
The commission wanted to know why we would go 3 years at the onset of a relationship rather than start with 1 year.
And so the commission wanted 1 year?
Yes.
And what did the group agree to?
We actually, this is the first time I've heard of this concern. When we originally negotiated the MOA, we asked for, I think, 5 years or something like that. Upon the recommendation of Ms. Jackson, we were told that we could get 3 years. If it was more than 3 years, I believe it had to be approved by City Council. So we went with 3 years. Again, the MOA was fully executed.
Is it 3 years with a cancellation clause?
Yes.
So what's the matter? What's the difference? I mean, realistically.
And the last point, which I don't know if I raised before, was the disposition of funds upon termination. The Commissioner Hudley Hayes felt as if the department should be able to decide what to do with the funds upon termination.
So what's the difference? What did the group want then?
It's the first time we heard of it.
It was a matter that was negotiated when we were negotiating the MOA, and it was something that the department conceded on.
Okay, I don't recall that.
And then what did the department concede?
That the 501(c)(3) status, the organization could decide.
Okay, so, I don't really understand. Maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah, it seems like really minor stuff to me.
I don't really get why are we even here? Why didn't we just proceed?
Commission need to agendize it and take it up.
Yeah.
The matter was terminated by the foundation. And when the matter appeared, the Board of Fire Commissioners accepted the termination.
So no, there's a new group that wants to move forward with it.
Yeah, okay. All right. I'm sorry, Mr.
I've not reviewed any agreements for any new
I
group.
understand there's a new group that wants to move forward with this.
Mm-hmm.
Since the original foundation members, other than two, who are now part of the new group, want to move forward with it. So
There's no reason they can't have multiple organizations. The police department has the Parker Foundation, the Foundation, and what's the Eagle and Badge. So they got multiple foundations that help them. Why? And then every division's got its own little one. I don't know. Yeah. So I don't know why the fire department couldn't as well.
Why don't we? Mr. Smith has a good suggestion. I just want to review the points. If the group is willing to agree to standard terms, no deviation, no negotiation, to address the concerns of the commission on sunshine, transparency, and framework and structure, 80/20, annual audited statements, which goes beyond just annual statements. 1-year term is a standard procedure, is that correct?
It's a suggested. I don't know if you could say that it was standard.
What does the Library Foundation do?
They now have a long-term agreement, but they have 1 year for their
for startup.
For their friends, 1 year.
1 year. 1 year, no discussion. And go back to the issue of disposition of funds, and then what is the standard procedure in the city for the disposition of funds?
It's negotiated, and it has some oversight with the...
What have other groups done? So we have a precedent.
Having worked closely with the library department and the parks department, and I think council needs a little oversight on this whole issue, whether it's part of the finance, to look at all these...
All I want to do is follow precedent, so we don't continue like another year with this circular roundabout, whatever. Just say, look, there's a lot of talking between people. I don't know what that's all about, on, personal relationships, on, people leaving this group, going into the other group. I don't know what that's all about, and I don't know that I really care, to tell you the truth. But all I can say is we offer a standard agreement with standard operating framework with precedent set forth by other groups that are similarly situated. Let's, as Mr. Smith may suggest, to send it back to the commission. What do you call that?
With a suggestion that they open the matter up and review it one more time.
does it go back to the original group or to the new group? The group that resigned? Or does it go back to...
No, this group here today.
But I thought they resigned from it.
But for issues that are really minor. I think what I'm saying is, this doesn't look like it's not overcomable. They're simple things, really. They're not huge issues. I think they'll all be resolved easily if people talk. And so let's ask the commission to take the matter up.
To the original group.
With the original group. And if they choose to have another group, that's fine. I think that's wonderful. But as far as this original group has invested so much time and energy in this, that the commission should take one more shot at and see what they can resolve by talking together these issues, rather than, this looks like it's almost little groups of people fighting all over the place and no one's focusing on the central point of it all.
But I suggest, so we don't have another 2 years of...
Yeah. Report back.
Standard conditions, no further negotiation, follow the precedents set forth by other organizations, 80-20 split. They've offered to do annual audited statements. great. Take them up on it, 1-year term to start, and then follow precedent for whatever other groups do on disposition of funds, and do that. We don't need to recreate a wheel. We have enough groups here in the city that so we can stop this round and round and round. And if the group chooses not to accept those standard operating terms, then they're free to be their own 501c3 and do whatever they want to do.
Mr. Chair, how about bringing it back for a...
Yeah, bring it back.
Update.
90 days? Is that good?
Yeah.
90 days?
Yeah, just one suggestion. There's other foundations, and I think all of us on the council need to review that. The CAO needs to do that, so that we should see how we could use it. Some of the money they give to foundations, they say they want to go to keep library hours going. But at the same time, they say they only want books. What do we want to focus on here? Do we want to focus on stuff that we're required by law to provide firefighters, or extra amenities that are there? And I think there's a whole lot of things to look at.
So we're going to ask the commission to review this matter, report back to us in 90 days, see if they can resolve the disparity on these issues, which looks like you got really close, but didn't quite make it over the hill.
I retract that. Mr. Where's the city attorney right there? Right
Mr.
here.
Labange is in charge of the ad hoc on this.
Okay. So that'll be the order. If
He
there's
wanted
any
to be a fireman.
objection,
He was a little boy.
seeing none, that'll be the order. Thank you very much for everyone. Let's take number 7, because it's relatively easy compared to 6, which will be a long discussion.
Item 7, see a report relative to a police department agreement with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department for the transfer of prisoners from police facilities to court for arraignment and when appropriate for the release of police arrestees.
Morning.
Morning. Good morning.
Sir, how are you? Who's got the mic?
I guess that's me.
That's you.
Matt Crawford for the Office of the CAO. The item before you is a new agreement between the Los Angeles County Sheriff and the Police Department for prisoner transportation and release. The agreement in front of you is a 5-year contract with 2 5-year city or county, or I guess city and county options. The current cost estimate, the costs change every year according to the county's acceptable cost rates, which are approved at each year. But currently it's about $3 million a year total.
And is there any increase at all in this?
There's no change specific in the contract regarding the costs. All the services being provided are the same. So
Same. This year's so far going to be the same.
Yes.
And it could be next year. It could go up, could not. But if that's the standard procedure. Okay.
Correct.
I've got a question, and Mr. Smith and I had the opportunity to view the new detention center. They have a state-of-the-art video arraignment at the new detention center. Why do we need to have this expenditure when we have a state-of-the-art video arraignment process at the detention center, which we could utilize and save this transportation and save this cost?
The department's probably best to address that from an operational standpoint.
Morning, Councilman. As you know, I've been in this position since December. My name is Scott Krober. I'm representing the Police Department's Office of Special Operations. The limited information I have on that was that the support that we need to make that happen on the city side was not forthcoming, either partially from the court system or primarily from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. That we rely on them to make that happen. In concept, it sounds good. It's sort of like night court. It's one of those things that sounds like it has a lot of utility, but doesn't quite meet the reality. That notwithstanding, as you saw from those facilities are prepared for that process, and we'll be looking at that and working with the Sheriff's Department to make that as efficient as we can.
But when we're talking about this term of 5 years with 2 5-year renewal options, it's 15 years down the road, and hopefully that detention center would be opened up before the next 5, 10, or 15 years.
It has to open next year.
Well, I would hope so. I know you need additional personnel because we were briefed on that and appreciated that tour, but I'm looking at a contract down at least 5 years for the first part, then another 5 and 5, when that state-of-the-art operation may come into play, but we're locked into this. So is there an escape clause if we end up in the courts more responsive and more receptive to video arraignment?
There is in the contract a clause which would allow either side to pull out of the agreement with acceptable notice. Rather than simply pulling out, I think what we would recommend is that the department continue to work with the county court system and the DA to try and figure out the best way to utilize the video arraignment process and the systems, and probably what we would end up doing is amending this contract to properly reflect any changes that need to happen.
Do we have the capability of video arraignment from other detention facilities within the Los Angeles Police Department, other than downtown Metro?
Good morning, Lieutenant Rick DiMartino, Jail Division. No, we don't have other capabilities in any of our city jails at this time.
So it's just downtown?
Yes.
Okay.
Just a question on the contract. Don't we have the ability, say Judge A across the street decides to start accepting more video arraignments? If we arraign them in our jail and release at that point, they're just not transported. So
That's correct. We would simply, that would be service that the county was not providing to us, and therefore we wouldn't be paying for it.
So we're not violating the contract. We're just not calling up the county saying we got 11 prisoners instead of 12. So it shouldn't be a contract problem then.
It should be relatively simple if any changes to the contract are required.
Okay.
Certainly nothing major.
Well, I would assume there would be no need to change the contract. It's just a matter of we phone them up and say how many prisoners we got to pick up.
Correct.
And if we get really lucky and start getting a bunch of them released early, hey, we just picking up less.
Councilman, that's correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right, with that, we'll go forward with the improvement committee. Thank you very much. And then that brings us to item number 6.
Item 6, CAO, CLA, Fire Department, to present verbal reports relative to the Police Department and Fire Department Efficiency Working Group.
Got all our toys working? Ready to rock and roll? The toys working today, or?
Check just to make sure.
We'll see. Now, while they're getting this up, members of the committee, I was talking to the department about this earlier in the last week and again this morning. It would be my suggestion, unless you choose otherwise, that we hear the presentation today, ask questions, make suggestions, but move this to council without recommendation, only because of the seriousness of the policy implications of this item, and rather than this committee picking one of the two, letting this go forward and let the whole council debate the whole item without this committee's recommendation, other than the input that we may have today on how they should change the presentation, which was really the impetus of having it here today, was just hear the presentation, the facts, the figures, and then go forward. So if that's not a problem with anybody, that's what we'll go forward and do that. All right. Getting close, Chief. Looks good.
I don't think we're going to start out with this, Councilman Smith, so if you want to start out, we can.
Go right ahead. Who's up first? Mark? June?
Hi, I'm June Gibson with the CLA. This item is a follow-up to the last efficiency working group meeting, and the chair had requested that we provide additional information on a series of items. They include the fire department's proposal to reduce the number of Bls ambulance hours, chief staff assistants, and also a Hon Smith motion regarding possible consolidation of fire suppression divisions and battalions. The first item that we have provided to the committee that should be on your desk is a survey that we have conducted of the county, San Diego, and San Francisco regarding the span of control of their assistant chiefs and their battalion chiefs. As you can see from this table, the span of control for the fire department is about 40% to 60% higher than the other public agencies. And so I think if there is consideration to consolidation, we think that there really would be a risk management concern with respect to that proposal. The next table relates to the fire department's proposal to redeploy 60 firefighters assigned to 10 basic life support ambulances and to staff the ambulances only during the peak 12-hour period from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. through overtime. When this matter was last considered by council, there were concerns that the department's ability to respond to life-threatening medical calls such as heart attacks would be negatively impacted. We don't believe it was sufficiently emphasized in that discussion that BLS ambulances are staffed by EMTs and respond and provide transport to life-threatening events. So attached to that table is also an information sheet that outlines the differences between ALS and BLS ambulances and also the difference in the resources to those. If I can go through the table itself, the bottom of the table lists the department's criteria for identifying the 10 BLS ambulances, which were call load, type and quantity of resources remaining in the fire station, and type and quantity of resources available in nearby fire stations. Below that, we also list the resources available at these fire stations, which are a BLS ambulance staffed by 2 EMTs and an advanced life support assessment engine staffed by 4 personnel, including a paramedic. Moving up to the chart itself, the pink portion shows the annual average ambulance call load for each fire station based on data that we received from 2007 through 2009. Moving to the first yellow column, that shows the daily average BLS incidents for each fire station. Where the daily average incident is less than 1, the number of days between incidents is shown in parentheses. Moving to the second yellow column, approximately 65% of incidents occurred during the peak hours of 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Again, there would be no change in resources because the BLS ambulance would be staffed on overtime. Approximately 35% of incidents occurred during the non-peak hours of 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. Although the BLS ambulance would be unavailable, the ALS assessment engine at these stations will continue to be the first responder to medical calls to that district. As shown in the first green column, for all of these fire stations, the daily average incident is less than 1, so the number of incidents between incidents is shown in parentheses. Approximately 50% of BLS incidents require transport, so the second green column shows the daily average transport, which ranges from 4 to 25 days between incidents. And then the blue section provides information on the availability of resources from nearby fire stations. The average distance of the nearest fire station with an ambulance is 1.5 miles. The average distance of the nearest fire station with a BLS ambulance is 4.4 miles, and there is an average of 7 ambulances and 15 engine companies within 5 miles that could respond to medical calls. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Cummings, who will provide additional information through his PowerPoint.
Okay, what I just want to briefly go through here is speaking on first the staff assistants and then on the 800 series ambulances and exactly explaining their roles as we move forward. This first portion talks about our fire resources and responding to structure fires, and we divide them into 3 different categories. A category A would be a smaller structure fire. It's based on gallons per minute that you need to flow for it, but category A would be a single family dwelling type fire where we'd send 1 light force, 3 engines, 2 rescue ambulances, a battalion chief, and an EMS captain. A smaller assignment, but we still have over 24 people showing up on scene with that first alarm assignment. With a category B, that extends to 2 light forces, 4 engines, the same 2 rescue ambulances again, a battalion command team, and that EMS captain. We're close to 36 individuals that are responding on scene, and the reason that's important is because each of those individuals has a radio, each of those companies is being assigned, and each of those resources need to be tracked. The way this unfolds with that initial dispatch is when we get that first engine company on scene, that first captain becomes the incident commander. He speaks on our dispatch channel and on a tactical channel to the other companies, and they attack the fire. He's accounting for just his resources, even though he is the incident commander. As soon as we get a light force on scene, the captain 2 takes over as the incident commander, and he'll remain on that apparatus on the truck so that he has access to the additional radios, because he's going to control that incident and start tracking that accountability. And he'll make tactical assignments. The first engine company was the fire attack he's going to assign his company to take ventilation on the roof, as an example of a structure fire. We had an engine company on scene, and he's documenting the location and the assignment of all these resources as they came. So Engine 2 came on scene, and they backed up fire attack. We got another truck company on scene, and he assigned them search and rescue on the fire floor. Additional engine company shows up on scene, and he has them take exposures to whichever side is most exposed. And that fourth engine company gets on scene, and he sets up medical group. As the rescue ambulances come on scene, he's assigning them to tactical assignments as well, either to support the firefighting operations or to provide rescue at the incident. And all those radio communications that are taking place, again, from those first arriving companies, that truck company is the captain is keeping accountability for him and speaking both on the dispatch channel to our dispatch and to the tactical channel to those resources, and those resources are talking back and forth as well. So as these people are showing up on scene, the radio communication becomes more and more, and it gets more critical that we're tracking those resources. Now that battalion chief shows up on scene and has the advantage of, since he was not driving to this incident, he's been tracking from the moment that first company got on scene. He's taken out a tactical worksheet and been able to give not only the identification of the resources, but where they're assigned in this incident, whether they're inside the fire, whether they're above the fire, on a floor above it, or whether they're on the roof or taking an exposure. So that in case there is a firefighter emergency and there's an emergency trigger, he can immediately provide assistance for those firefighters by communicating the location where they're at. The couple of standards that, again, that are driving all this, the safety and the firefighter accountability, NFPA 1500 and 1561, and the written guidelines that talk about exactly how we provide for firefighter safety and accountability. They talk about all members being responsible for their own accountability, but that the incident commander is responsible for overall for all the members on scene. He's supposed to provide a worksheet that maintains that accountability, documents where they're located at there, and has to keep an awareness of that. The reason that's so important, again, if a firefighter's in trouble, on every radio that we have, there's a trigger button similar to LAPD, and when you press that button, if you're in trouble, it sends a code to our dispatch. And the dispatcher will know what company that person was on, what position and what company, but they won't know where they're at. And that's when the incident commander has to reconcile it on that tactical worksheet to determine the location where that individual is so that we can deploy individuals to effect a rescue. The accountability system, again, called for by 1500 and 1561, formalized accountability system. It's on-scene documentation. Its use of the incident command system is required both by the national government and state and the local government. Our radios with the emergency trigger and our entire dispatch procedure. The staff assistant, primary responsibility on emergencies. Again, that firefighter safety and that accountability. Coordination, communication, and documentation, and then working with that teamwork with the battalion commander. He's driving and focusing on emergency responding when we're en route while the chief is maintaining that tactical worksheet. But as soon as we get on scene, they divide. The chief remains in the front so that he can speak on those 4 radio channels, while the staff assistant goes to the back to open up the rear to set up the command workstation, make sure the 7 radios are on the correct channels, to write down, to transcribe that incident accountability on the tactical worksheet, and when everything's set up, he'll call for the chief to come back, and even for that short trip to the back of the apparatus, the chief's going to take a portable radio so that he doesn't miss any of those radio messages as things get critical. Tactical worksheet, and I'll show an example of that next. He's recording not just the identification of those resources, but their status, where they're assigned in there, and then the situation status. What's the fire doing? What's the life hazard? Where's it going from there? And then the incident structure with that incident command system. There's 2 examples of our incident worksheets. Across the top, it has the specifics of the incident. The resources are listed down the left-hand side of that. And there's an enlarged one of these forms. It's on the tactical workstation in the back so that he can roll out a tabletop, transcribe all that information, and we have instant access to where people are and what they're doing at the incident. Use at all levels. A big key of that staff assistant, not only that firefighter accountability, but managing the radio communication. At any particular incident, the reason we have 7 radios is because it's critical that we're able to speak to not just our dispatch center and control tactical operations, but we'll be speaking on command channels to other supervisors on scene, a staging channel for resources arriving on scene, Channel 6, that one in red there, the emergency traffic channel, where all companies are always maintaining that because it's important we never miss a message on that. And then we, working with our law partners or working with other mutual aid companies that respond in. So all of those are being communicated on, and having that staff assistant there to assist as part of the command team with managing those communications is critical. That's the back of the battalion sedan, our command vehicle. It shows you the 7 radios that we have set up. On the left side there, we normally have the dispatch channel, the staging channel, and the staff assistant's usually working from that side. The battalion chief is normally working on the right side, speaking on the tactical command channel and the command channel. And then that emergency channel, alert channel 6, it's centered because that staff assistant, even though they have their own assignments, they're both listening for that to make sure they don't miss radio messages. With one company on scene, everyone has a radio. If you're just speaking on one TAC channel, that's 9 links of different communications that can be going on. By the time that you get up to 10 resources being on scene, that first alarm assignment, there's over 1,900 possible combinations of people talking to each other on scene. So the radio messages, it's a very steep curve as units get on scene, as the operations escalate on scene, so it's extremely critical that we're constantly monitoring those. And here's an example of how they set up. The staff assistant, again, is over on the left side, and he's documenting things there on that tactical worksheet. The battalion chief is on the other side. He's speaking on both the command channel and on the incident tactical channel. And again, resource status, who's en route, who's on scene already, who's standing by as reserve, who's assigned to something, the situation status, what's burning on the building, what's around it, what are our problems going to be, and then a communication plan. We have a tactical channel that we're speaking for people that are doing things. That command channel, what is it? What channel is it? Do we have additional channels that we've assigned to different floors, different geographic regions? We need to manage that from his location. And then as the incident expands, again, those first resources, we've got right there we have 8 companies on scene, so right now the battalion command team is talking to those 8 different individual resources that are on scene. But as we get additional folks showing up on scene, we start getting more and more, and we start getting beyond that span of control. 3 to 7 is usual span of control, with 5 being ideal. Once you get above 7 people that you're speaking to, it's easy to drop radio messages. And as more companies come on scene and you're controlling more and more tactical resources, there's more radio traffic, and it's difficult to differentiate where people are at, even using that tactical worksheet. And that's, again, where we use more command and more overhead. The division commander shows up on scene at this point. His staff assistant is assisting the battalion staff assistant with reconciling where those resources are and with a communication plan. We'll get additional battalion command teams on scene, and if that lower group of resources you see there is assigned to a fire floor, we'll assign that battalion command team as a division on that fire floor, and that chief and the staff assistant will actually don their SCBAs or protective equipment, and they'll go on that fire floor with them. And now the chief in the command post is just communicating with that chief, who then on another channel is talking to all of his tactical resources. So we're breaking that down into smaller manageable pieces according to the ICS system. But having that staff assistant is critical because we can't deploy that chief into those fire environments. They call it an IDLH, immediately dangerous to life and health. We can't send individual members in there. We have to send them in as teams. That's mandated, again, by not only by NIOSH, but by the NFPA. So the staff assistant's monitoring 2 radio channels while the chief is. They both carry 2 radios, and they're documenting and controlling those resources that are assigned to them. And we'll try to, again, as the incident escalates, we'll get more command teams on scene to take over larger chunks of tactical resources to maintain that 3 to 5 coverage of officers that are talking to the command post as we move forward through the incident. So that's the importance of the staff assistants, maintaining that firefighter accountability, firefighter safety, being able to respond if we have an emergency trigger and immediately identify the location of those individuals so that the chief can communicate that back to our dispatch. to be with go into the fire with the fire chief, with the battalion chief if they're assigned to a tactical assignment. If we do get that emergency trigger, there's a lot of things that have to happen very quickly at the command post. The staff assistant identifies where that person was assigned, where that company was assigned, and requests from our dispatch to send additional resources to supplement what we have on scene. They tell our dispatch to announce that there's an emergency traffic so that it can go out to everyone on scene. The battalion commander has to speak on the tactical channel to those tactical resources to relay that message, so hopefully someone close to where that problem was can begin to effect rescue. We can launch those rescue resources in to effect a rescue of that firefighter, and then we need to maintain the firefighting efforts that are going on. We can't just drop that, because if the fire continues to get bigger, we're really endangering others, including that firefighter. So these are very critical roles that the staff assistant takes. A lot of the conversation has been on the chief's driver or the administrative tasks that they do, and I'd argue that those are extras that we get out of these individuals. The critical thing that they do is this firefighter safety on those critical incidents that they do respond on. The next portion is on BLS ambulances. Would you like me to proceed in that, or did you want to ask some questions about the staff assistants?
Let's do the whole thing, and then we'll go back and forth.
And it's very short for the BLS ambulances. Again, we have two types of BLS calls, basic life support calls. They are our lower priority calls. We have emergency BLS calls. These normally have a higher probability of transport, and then we have non-emergency calls. For those type calls, the primary unit that the computer is looking for is one of our EMT ambulances. It'll look and search for the closest resource. If there's an EMT ambulance, it'll send it to it. But if that EMT ambulance isn't there, it's going to look for, we have EMTs on every resource that we have out there. So if it can't find that, it'll look for an engine company. If there's not an engine company that's close, it'll look for a light force. If there's not a BLS light force, then it'll look for one of our ALS assessment resources. But it'll send some fire company, whatever's closest, to handle that particular call. If one of those fire resources is what's dispatched to the call, for these high probability transport, they're also going to send a BLS ambulance non-emergency. So the fire company will get on scene, assess the patient, do medical documentation on them, and if they do require a transport, the BLS ambulance will get there, take over the patient, and transport them non-emergency to the hospital. If there's no BLS ambulance close, it'll send an ALS ambulance as well to go and take the transport. Again, 89 ALS ambulances and 38 BLS ambulances are what we have out there in the system. If it's a BLS low transport probability, it still wants to send that BLS ambulance. But again, it'll look in the same category looking for those resources like it did before. It'll send any one of those in that priority. And when they get on scene, whatever gets on scene first, it'll make the decision, okay, actually this was a transport, they do need a ride to the hospital, so then they'd request a transport resource to come through non-emergency and take that patient to the hospital. And the final category of that was just our non-emergency high transport. These, again, the ambulance is responding non-emergency, but on most of these calls, they've decided that they're probably going to result in a transport. So it'll look for that BLS ambulance. If it's not there, it'll look through those fire companies. It'll send the fire company non-emergency, and then it'll send whatever our closest transport resource is. In all these, the 10 selected locations, those BLS ambulances are assigned, are housed with an assessment engine. So in those 12 hours when the BLS ambulance would be closed, that assessment engine would be the resource that's responding on all the calls that came up for this BLS ambulance, because it would be the closest resource. So it would get there in the same amount of time as that BLS ambulance. The closest ambulance for all of these is, it averages, I believe, what'd you say, June, 1.5 miles away. I think the furthest one was 2.1 miles away for the closest transport for all of these stations. You're going to get a transport there which would be coming non-emergency in the same amount of time that you would, slightly longer than you would if it was in-house, but again, it's 2 miles further away, so you're still going to get them. These are the lowest priority, least critical calls that these are going on. So they're very low frequency and very low criticality, whereas I think with those staff assistants, the calls they're going on are the most critical calls that we're going on. So I don't think the two resources really truly compare if you look at them that way.
Okay, I have a couple questions. One, on this very point, on the BLS dispatch. If you have the non-emergency dispatch, you don't have a BLS there, you send the nearest engine company for an assessment. If it's what the police department call 390 down, I don't know what you call them, but it's a drunk laying on the ground. You make an assessment, they just need to be sobered up. They're not really going to a hospital or anything. Do you still dispatch the nearest BLS, or if there's no BLS down the street, do you default to an ALS for something like that?
We'll default to the closest company. If it happened in one of the districts where the 800 would be closed, that assessment engine would take that call.
Right.
Because it's the closest resource, and they'd assess the patient. On that 390 down, we'd probably end up transporting that patient if they're altered, because that meets our transport criteria. And for an altered patient like that,
What if they were
ALS.
drunk and they just scraped their knee? You're not going to take them to the hospital for that. right?
If they're altered, if you're in an altered state of consciousness, we're required to transport you to the hospital by an ALS resource.
Okay, they're not that drunk, then they
Okay.
just scrapes their knee,
Correct.
then what?
They can do, if it's a patient, say they just scraped their knee and they're not altered, they're not drunk, they'll document it, they'll have them sign the patient documentation, and they'll make themselves available and go back to quarters.
But they'll put them a Band-Aid on it and let them go.
Yes, sir.
So you don't dispatch the nearest, you don't find another ambulance company then?
If it's a call where we normally wouldn't transport, it's not a high probability of transport, they could send an engine company along. But normally they'll dispatch that ambulance non-emergency, and they'll keep en route until that first company gets on scene and makes that determination.
Okay. A couple of things just for the committee members that came up. I want you to understand that the NFPA guidelines that you talk about are not mandatory. They're guidelines. So there's best practices. So when the department or Mr. McCosh comes and says, these are the things we have to do, we don't have to do them. We should do them because of the best practice, but they're not mandatory. So I think you need.
There are national standards, though, sir.
It's a standard, right, again. And not everybody adheres to that standard, obviously.
A standard and a requirement.
Right. Yeah. So I just want to point that out. That's something that came out that I wasn't aware of. I think you need to understand that. And then to start off, and I have a few questions, but to start off too, you gave me one comment this morning I want you to repeat, and that is of the two things that we're considering here, that the fire department feels very strongly that the assistants are more important than the ambulance discussion, because it's firefighter safety first and foremost, whereas the BLS ambulances are not.
Correct. The staff assistants provide for firefighter safety and accountability and respond to critical incidents, whereas the BLS ambulances, the 35 calls a day they go on, lower priority calls, and the other 111 ambulances in the city would respond to those 35 calls if necessary.
And don't be reticent to answer that, because the point is, and for most people don't understand this, but the police and fire department both, the first priority is the men and women of those departments. The second is the health and safety of the public, which they're there to serve. The police and fire both train that you're there to protect your people first and foremost, and then it defaults to protecting and serving the public.
Correct.
And that's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody understands that. But so when we're talking about these two issues, the fire department looks at the department and says, our first and foremost responsibility is the men and women that serve our department, make sure they're safe and doing their job. That's why you've chosen the assistance role, because it does that function, versus the 10 ambulances in question, which is not a firefighter safety issue. It's high, at least. It's a public safety issue.
Councilman Smith, the fire department would like to go on record that we do not support either one of them.
Oh, you've done that many times. That's okay.
That's where you're supposed to say it's a policy decision, and then you look at us, and then.
I would also point out that NIOSH, which is an independent agency, consistently investigates firefighter fatalities, and part of their recommendations is that fire departments provide for firefighter accountability. And so in times where we look at complexity of incidents, such as we encounter in Los Angeles, we've had problems in the past with the Dupuy incident, and were cited by NIOSH in that case there. And And a recent case across the country in New York, where they ended up with a double fatality, where the incident commander was unable to manage the incident because of not being able to keep up with the radio transmissions. Yeah. It's a very complex
and again, that would
environment.
aid in a lawsuit against the city as far as the loss of a firefighter goes. Again, but it's not a mandatory situation. Okay, so, and we need to keep that clean and understand there's a difference there. We should choose to do all we can to conform, but there's no mandatory requirement other than if we lost a firefighter, God forbid, because of this, it opens up the lawsuit liability greater. Okay. A couple questions. As I look, and I have been out, I had a fire line pass. I won't show you because the picture's disgraceful. But I had a fire line pass going back 30 years when I had a mustache and long hair and all that stuff. So I've been out.
I'd like that.
You're not going to see it.
For the record.
You're never going to see it. But I've been on the fire line many times in LA City. I was a firefighter in the La Habra Heights Volunteer Fire Department when I was younger. I understand this very choreographed role that they play. It is a critical function, but it is, as the report says, 9% of the time. So now as I look down the list of all the other functions that these guys provide to the department, I almost have to ask, what do chiefs do? I mean, you look down, they do everything in the office. What are the chiefs doing all the time now?
The chiefs provide leadership, sir. Okay. There's a considerable, again, if you look at a typical battalion, anywhere from 56 to 95 individuals that you're supervising, anywhere from 8 to 17 supervisors that you're supervising. Providing leadership is a large part of what our field battalion chiefs do. Getting around and speaking to those different work assignments, determining that the training is being done, coaching, mentoring, making sure that we have positive work environments, providing leadership. Just as any executive would have a staff that does a lot of the staff work, the administrative tasks for them. The staff assistant, we've been able to utilize the staff assistant to take care of those things for our battalion chiefs. Even though, and we keep saying 9% of the time they're doing those emergency ops, I would argue that because of the criticality of that, if it was 1%, it would still be important, because if you look at low-frequency events, the time when you get in trouble with low-frequency events is those high-risk ones, because you don't do them enough to be practiced at them. A high-frequency, high-risk event, you do it enough to where you're practiced at it, you're ready for it, you see what's coming. But when you have a low-frequency, high-risk event, it's something that hits you that you're not planning, you're not foreseeing. And having that extra layer of accountability and firefighter safety to making sure that you have a team that's working together all the time, as opposed to a team that comes together uniquely for each incident from two different locations. Practicing those skills, what to do when there's a firefighter emergency, what to do when you get on scene, when there's an escalating event, who's going to take what with radio messages, practicing that third ear.
I get all that.
Okay.
And I don't think you have to convince me that they're absolutely invaluable in those situations. The question is, as I look now at all the other administrative functions that they provide, the question now comes back to Ms. Hahn's motion is, could we consolidate some of these battalion chiefs then and still be as effective? And that hasn't been addressed here yet today.
Councilman, the answer to that is no. Consolidation would have expand the span of control and have disastrous impact on the department.
But as I look at span of control, other departments have larger spans of control than you do.
I think it's just the opposite. If you look at Ms. Gibson's sheet, that we're getting a lot more done with a lot less overhead than most other departments.
Okay. But I said other departments. I didn't say the majority. There are others that do. So
I think I would allow June to speak to that.
Yeah, I think what we demonstrated on our table with respect to the supervisory employee ratio, there's a much larger ratio with the city of L.A. For example, the approximate staff per battalion in L.A. City is 75, whereas with the other agencies, it ranges between 30 to 45.
Yeah, what I didn't see are those large departments out of California, which you did have on the other chart.
Right, and we started to do the survey for the staff assistants, We did provide we did obtain some information from the other agencies. There was a lack of clarity in the information that was provided to us. We did not have the opportunity to go back to them, and so we can follow up.
And that's one of the recommendations, is you clean that up a little more, because if you're citing Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, and the other part of the report, you should keep it consistent here so we can see what we're talking about.
Right. Can I just say, though, that with from what I could recall, Chicago we could not get a hold of. With New York and Philadelphia, my recollection, once again, was that the ratio was much smaller than it is with the city of L.A. Can I just make one comment with regard to the staff assistants and the issue of incident support? The third table, which I didn't get a chance, to comment on, does provide a survey of these other agencies. There are a couple of agencies in California that we surveyed that do not have full-time staff assistants, and that's the County of L.A. and San Diego. And with respect to the city of San Francisco has 9 battalions, and about 6 to 7 years ago, they did have budget cuts, and so they eliminated the full-time staff assistants for 6 of the battalions, but they do have them for 3 of them, which they consider to be the higher risk. Those would be the stations that oversee the high-risk district, the airport, and also hazardous materials. So there is not a minimization of the recognition of the importance of having an incident support or safety officer at the scene. They managed to do some workarounds associated with not assigning a full-time staff assistant for that purpose.
And I said this to the chief this morning, and I think it's important to point out, is L.A. counties, we look at L.A. county as a totally different department than L.A. city. And I presume San Diego as well, because most of those, it's a consolidated agency now down there, and they're looking more at wildland forest management as well as a little bit of the in urban city, whereas L.A. City is an urban city fire department with the exception of the rims around the city. So it's totally different kind of firefighting functions in those departments, and we need to take that into account as we look at these differences between the departments. On your chart, June, when you're looking at really the blue section, you're talking about averages. Is this versus the citywide average or the average of the 10 we're looking at?
Just the 10.
And so how does it compare? I'd like to see the comparison on the citywide numbers as well then. So as you look down, you've got the 10 stations here, the distance in miles, 1.5. I think a concern that both Mr. Weezer, myself, Mr. Krikorian had is if the average is 1.5 here, what is the average citywide to the next unit? Because we're looking at stations that are on the rim of the city. In my district, the 2 that you're looking at, there's absolutely nothing to the north to support them. Everything would come from the south or the east and west, and in some cases, nothing even to the west. So you're really limited what you can draw from. So you may have one station 1.5 miles or 2 miles to the south, but there's nothing to the north, nothing to the west. That is a critical distinction, I think, between some of the more urbanized stations. So I'd like to see what it is against the rest of the city as a number, okay? Take that. And as you look at, if this was the 10, what was number 11 on the list? Was there a big drop-off from these 10, or was the next one just a small drop-off? Because if I'm looking at some of these stations, and there's one in my district that we're looking at 70% of the time, where was it? Non-peak, okay. Fire Station 18, 35% of the calls are in non-peak hours. That's to me a large number, quite frankly. I have a hard time saying that 35% of the time it's okay not to have a BLS ambulance nearby. So when you look at some of these larger numbers, that becomes problematic. So what is number 11? Is number 11 station, whatever it may be, wherever it was, is it going to be similar to that, or is it going to be just a big drop-off?
Were you looking at the percentage, sir, or the number of calls?
I'm looking at really the percentage of calls that are peak versus non-peak, because that to me is kind of the basis of where I got to decide on this. So
I think we're looking at numbers so small, sir, that we're talking 2 or 3 calls a shift. So when you look at on peak or off peak, wherever you move it for that particular station, you're either going to catch one run or two runs, so it's going to either be 33% or 66%. So it's that 11th company, Rescue 829 averages 8.2 calls a shift last quarter, and they go up. They start accelerating up from there.
Okay, so number 11 on the list, statistically, you're saying is maybe big numbers, but the numbers that you're dealing with are so small that the statistics are thrown out of whack. So then is number 11 the difference between 11, 2.2, and 2.5 then, average?
Councilman, I would point out that there are other rescues that aren't on this list that would fall within this range because of their geographic location. In other words, 828 would be on this list also, but it's right next to 8
already, and 18.
And 18,
yeah,
and it's in that same general area.
So you drop that off the list
we
already?
We drop that off.
Okay.
It would be the same thing with some of the rescues that would appear on this list that would be over adjacent to 842 and 860.
That's an important distinction I needed to know, and I hadn't heard that before. So I think as you look to the 4 or 5 council members that are going to lose ambulances, they need to know that too then.
Right.
Okay. Right. Other questions?
Sir? I'm not sure whether or not I need to provide a better explanation of what we were trying to achieve with this table. If you look at the second section for BLS incidents daily average, we were focusing in on that because the intention of the reduction of the 12 hours is for the 12 hours during the non-peak period in the evening. And looking at fire station number 18, the daily average for BLS incidents is approximately just 1 per day. Mm-hmm. And so what we tried to do was to give an indication that there are several days that elapse in non-peak hours on average. So it's 1 incident every 3 days for a BLS incident for which a response would be required.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
The issue of can we afford this comes up, and the issue of how do you balance your books. These are the options, 2 of the options, the staff assistants and the ambulances. The issue of downtime at hospitals, when the paramedics, firefighters are waiting around to release that body to the hospital. Have we analyzed how often those units are tied up for extended period of time, not back into service, which puts the load on someone else? Because I've heard up to 8, 9 hours where they're sitting around waiting to release this individual.
Councilman, I know that when there is an extended time that we dispatch an EMS captain to follow up to document the reason and to see if there's a way to move that along. I'm not sure that I have that exact time frame when that happens.
But is that a
but
problem?
I can come back.
Is
it
that
has
a
been a
problem?
problem in the past where our resources are tied up because they do not have beds available at the hospital. And so we've worked to, first of all, to get our arms around that and to minimize that by sending a responsible resource to check with the hospital. And see
But
if-
does that free up that crew to return back to service? Or then trickle down to the next station, the next station? I mean, I've heard paramedics tell me that they've waited up to 8 hours, which I think is ridiculous, to release a body to the emergency room because sometimes those hospitals are jammed. I mean, that to me, those folks are out of service for 8 hours sitting there babysitting this individual.
I have not heard stories that long, but I cannot dispute that at all.
Well, somehow we should address that, because if we are going to do something because of the budget, and we obviously have to do something, and there's many departments that are over budget, and we need to come up with some kind of process, it just seems that that's an issue where we can get these folks back into the field quicker versus 8 hours sitting around, or 6 or 5 hours, or 3 hours.
I've heard the 8 hours too, by the way.
I think that's a valid
Is there a way we can tabulate?
And I would ask for time to come back with information on that for you.
We need to evaluate to see how much time is downtime waiting for that patient to be released to a hospital person. And not that we could just leave the person there on the gurney and take off, but there's got to be some kind of cooperation.
And what we have done is we have responded and had instead of having 2 or 3 units in a hospital waiting for beds, we'll have one resource that provides care to the 3.
Okay.
We'll have a transfer of care.
Instead of having 6 ambulances stacked up.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the department internally can't control that. That's a
No, I know,
hospital
I know.
issue. But it is something that we have actively managed. And I could provide more accurate information on the frequency of that and the duration.
And then the couple of issues, I support the fire department. I understand when it hits the fan, how those staff assistants with those 7 radios, I mean, both Councilman Smith and I have been in law enforcement for a long time, and when it, you never know what's going to happen. Yesterday happened an earthquake, it's a Sunday, Easter Sunday, and then you call your folks in because disaster striking. We don't know. So I understand the necessity for that, and they're basically there to serve that purpose, just like the firefighters. They wait, the fire strikes, they get there as quickly as they can to take care of them. It's life and property. So I'm not going to say we can't afford it, but I'm going to say how do we balance that budget and try and manage it. The other question I have regarding the paramedic service and the BLS, the ALS, we have a tremendous amount of senior citizen homes, rest homes in the city of Los Angeles. I have some in the area that I live. And constantly, 105 and 106, they're responding, code 3, taking these people or pronouncing, or whatever the case may be. Have we done anything to address that issue, that drain of service to those facilities where there's an extra charge, there's a this, there's a that, they're required by law to do something to care for the elderly that they have custody and control of?
We have not specifically targeted retirement or board and care type facilities, but we do charge for transports. We also are looking at several initiatives, such as the insurance initiative, where they pay up front a fee type thing. So we're looking at those initiatives. We're looking to make our charge for service consistent across the county also.
Which would also assist with the budget that you folks have to deal with.
Yes.
The issue of, is it come down to these 2 areas to save the dollars, either the staff assistants or the ambulance? Are there any other options?
First of all, I'd point out that in this current fiscal year that we are going to meet our budget. In fact, we're doing slightly better than what was asked of us. So if this is targeted at this fiscal year, it's additional savings than was asked in the approved budget.
Okay. So you're going to end up this fiscal year, end of June, with a balanced budget?
Yes, sir.
Because of the cost savings that have already been implemented?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, next year, your chief's going to get a 10% cut.
And next year, we have different initiatives that do not include either one of these.
Okay. Because your folks are the experts, and you know how to manage it, how to run it.
Right.
And I don't want to impede what you need to do for public safety, but at the same time, when there's only so much to go around, and the police department's going to face that with their $80 million over expenditure, how they're going to have to make some serious cutbacks.
We understand that.
The issue also on the chart, we have Station 106, and then the nearest fire station with BLS ambulance 28.
That's correct.
Station 28?
Station 28, which is up in the Porter Ranch area.
Okay. So 105, or not, actually 106, and then the nearest station. So you got 28 in Porter Ranch. What about 105?
Doesn't have a BLS ambulance, sir. What that's showing is the closest BLS ambulance to 106s, but actually close to 106s, you have 105s, which is 2.1 miles away, which has a light force and engine and a paramedic rescue ambulance. You have 72s, which has a light force and engine and a paramedic ambulance that's 2.5 miles away. Then 3.4 miles away is Engine 104, Rescue 104. So there's a lot of resources that are around it, but the only other BLS ambulance that's over there would be Rescue 28.
And the 800 series, what are those?
800 cents for, I'm sorry, sir.
That's a BLS ambulance. It's the same.
So 800 is a BLS?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as Mr. Smith said, 9% of the time, those staff assistants are actually engaged in some major activity.
Emergency operations.
Emergency operations. But if you look at your call load from the fire department perspective, I heard it's 80+% paramedic, versus fire calls or earthquakes or whatever.
That's correct.
And that would say that affecting the ambulance service cutback, a reduction, we're going to affect 80+% of the use of the fire department.
Those particular ambulances, though, account for 35 calls a day.
35 a day?
35 a day, total calls. That's not, and they're added for staffing to structure fire calls, they're added for staffing to ALS calls, but BLS calls alone is a much smaller number, but 35 calls total a day. All the battalion chiefs respond to about 29 calls a day. So the numbers are comparable, but again, those BLS ones are responding to non-critical, non-emergency calls, whereas all those 29 structure calls. In January, we had 189 calls for structure fires. 99 of them turned out to be greater alarm structure fire type incidents. So 99 opportunities where people were in danger.
Okay, no, I'm just talking about how we're going to budget for the need when you've got the paramedic service, the ALS, BLS, versus the fire service, and not to discount the assistance, but to say, are we sacrificing the issue of paramedic, BLS, ALS, when it's 80+% of the fire calls, or the fire department response?
Councilman Zine, I don't think you can compare the call loads because they're not apples, they're apples and oranges. They're two different things. Swiftwater incidents are such a small, infinitesimally small amount of what we do,
right, and
yet we provide that service.
Every time it rains.
Every time it rains, which doesn't happen a lot here in sunny California.
Okay.
But you still have to have the resources to deal with that issue when that event occurs. It's very similar with the battalion and staff assistants when it comes to managing the department and actually responding to incidents. 9% of the time is what they figure for.
Well, I'm not complaining about that.
Right. But when it comes down to being prepared and having the resources available, then that's when that team is so critical to have that team together. As a result of having the staff assistants, not only do a superb job managing those complex incidents, but we don't have any civilian support staff in the field at all. We have one typist for the entire field resources.
Right.
And so we make the best use of those personnel that are doing that limited amount of effort.
Okay, I'm not going after the assistants. Okay. I'm just saying the use of the ambulance, the issue of the backlog at the hospitals, where they're not in service, that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
To have more of them out there, because that's a huge issue for the fire department response to medical issues.
Right, and so that would go in line with other endeavors where we've tapped into the Metro bus system to use their traffic signal priority system so that we can reduce response times.
Right.
And we're trying to do everything we can to keep the number of resources up and make sure they're deployed so that we get the best response time possible.
That's where I'm going with it.
And 111 ambulances that'll still be in service during those 12 hours where they're closed, responding to half the time, basically, so less than 35 extra calls. It's not that huge an increase in the call load. It's manageable. Would it be ideal to keep all of them open? Absolutely.
Yeah. But again, it's the cost of running that operation. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned something when the question was asked by the chairman about what do the chiefs do, and you gave some examples of leadership. Just want to give you some advice. You might want to use the word management, because leadership is so esoteric and it's so used in so many different ways. Some council members might laugh when you say leadership. We consider ourselves leaders, but if you took a poll on any given day, we might get at best 30% of the people saying that we are. So just try to be careful when you use the word leadership so much in explaining what anybody does. You might want to transfer the word management or some other adjectives. Now, when it comes to what they do on the incidents, are they receiving information, or are they receiving and or assigning and or issuing orders when they're filling out the card and keeping track of people and all that stuff?
You're speaking of the staff assistant.
Yes.
Yes. Their primary function is to track the resources so that we can be accountable for the location. The staff assistant is that firefighter's handshake to the outside. If he's inside, he or she are inside a burning structure and you don't have visibility, that's that firefighter's guarantee that somebody knows where they are operating so that if things go wrong, we can get and muster our resources in a timely fashion. The other part is tracking the resources so that the battalion chief managing the incident can deploy resources most effectively for public safety to effect rescue, to stop the progress of that fire. So primarily, they're a set of ears and documenting.
Tracking.
So the battalion chief is looking over to see where actual resources are.
So really the person on the scene, that staff assistant, is actually interacting verbally or otherwise with the battalion chief?
The battalion chief is primarily interacting with the companies, with the officers on the scene, directing the fire. And the staff assistant is listening to and tracking those resources, and if there is a call primarily to our dispatch, then the staff is going to be making that request for additional resources and updating the dispatch center.
And is anybody in the moment asking that staff assistant for information?
Sure.
Or verification?
The dispatch center commonly asks, and it's the staff assistant that responds back. You have to understand that each firefighter has a radio and has the ability to communicate. So as the number of units get on the scene, the number of radio messages increases very fast, especially at a dynamic incident. And that's where the extra set of ears is so critical, because what we want to do is make it something that somebody can manage and we don't miss messages. It's when you miss messages that we see a collision and we have the potential of a bad outcome.
Now, when it comes to when a department unfortunately slips up on that kind of information, tragedy occurs, are there examples of what the hit was to that particular city or county or fire department in the lawsuit? Do they tend to be the kind of lawsuits where they're settled for a couple $100,000, or are they the kind of lawsuits if we have a loss of life, say of a firefighter or something, or several firefighters, is it in the millions of dollars?
I can't speak to that. I've been familiar with a couple of cases, but I can't say that is the norm at all.
Okay, well, the cases that you're familiar with?
Well, they've been up in the $1 million range.
1 million or millions?
1 million was the final settlement. So.
Councilman Cardenas, I'd argue that ultimately the cost of the city of Los Angeles is that firefighter, regardless of what the financial cost or the liability.
That goes without saying. You know, what's the value of a life? It's infinite. You can't put a price on it. You can't put a price on it. But we as a city, we're a self-insured city, which means it's not ABC Life Company that actually, or insurance company that actually, when we settle or we get sued and someone is successful, that they write the check. It's the same general fund that we're talking about here on item number 6 that actually has to write the check whenever we go to court, and as a result of that, there's money to be paid. Okay? So thank you for helping to clarify that. That goes without saying, but you know, that firefighter's life, anybody's life, you know, it is priceless. And what we should try to do at all times is try to do the best job that we can to preserve life, regardless of whose life it is, whether they're working for the city or they're a constituent, a citizen. We need to be trying our best to make sure that we're as effective as possible when we are charged with that responsibility. Now, it was mentioned earlier that the department, this is a difficult matter for the department to have to put forth. You know, policymakers, you can choose to reduce ambulances. These are the places in which you can do so, or somebody's talking about perhaps staff assistants aren't exactly all that important, or maybe we can even look into consolidating them and spreading out their responsibilities even thinner than they are today. Maybe we can get the chiefs to do more work or what have you, that the assistants do, et cetera. That's what we're faced with. So as of right now, between the two black and white examples that have been presented to this committee at this time, which one do you recommend still?
Councilman, if you've asked the department to come up with their recommendation, it was the variable staffing of the BLS ambulances. It's our position that that would have the least impact overall on public safety and the department.
Thank you.
Okay, public comment, Mr. McCosker has been biting his tongue back there.
Hello again. Good afternoon now, I should say. Pat McCusker, President of United Firefighters. I came down today on this item to try to sell you on the importance of both, the critical nature of both, you know, the 20 firefighters in those ambulances on duty every day and the 19 staff assistants on duty every day for you in terms of public safety and firefighter safety. The fire department has done a very good job of telling you why staff assistants are important, and I concur. They're absolutely critical. The duties that they do have to be performed. They're all about firefighter safety, and I agree with them. So I won't dwell on that too much, but please don't misunderstand what I'm going to say. What I want to say is those ambulances are critical to public and firefighter safety as well. What hasn't been presented to you is they exist. They're there because of the most critical calls that we have, the chance to save a life when we get there. And what I mean by that is, you all know that we get calls all day long where paramedics are not needed, where a paramedic transport is not needed, but we've got to get them to the hospital. Those are the ones that are handled by these ambulances so that paramedics are available when then the heart attack occurs in your district, in that district. It's also true, as has been talked about already, that they relieve paramedic resources at the hospital. What isn't said is, you know, when we have that most critical call, the heart attack, where we got to get someone there immediately, and the closest resource is not that paramedic resource, not the ambulance with paramedics on it. We send the closest resource so that we're compliant with getting there within 4 minutes 90% of the time. Actually, our standards are too low regarding that. I'm going to run out of time by a mile if I was to really try to explain to you how important these are. But we've got to get someone there in the case of a heart attack, for instance, to do CPR within 4 minutes to save a life. Well, that's a 800 ambulance getting there first oftentimes. If it's not them, it's going to be someone else, a fire company that is now not available on a fire call or other critical call. So you see there's this whole domino effect. The reason that we have 800 series EMT ambulances is because of the most critical calls, so that we have paramedics and fire companies available when those things happen as well. So eliminating them, there's a domino effect, there always will be, and you're going to impact public safety. You're also going to impact, by the way, firefighter safety, because especially in places like 28's and 18's district, they're always part, but they're part of the fire response out there. In a place as remote as that, you need those extra 2 firefighters, because it's going to be a while till the other backups get there. They're coming from further away. So keep in mind that they're equipped with breathing apparatus, they're firefighters trained to fight fire, and they're part of our response to fires as well and all the other emergencies. So again, there's this domino effect. If you eliminate 10 ambulances, you're going to further impact our ability to respond in the city of Los Angeles and our ability to keep paramedics available for the most critical calls when they can get on scene and save a life. So again, I would argue that we need both, and it's Sophie's choice to ask us to choose between ambulances and staff assistants. I only differ from the department in that regard. They're absolutely right how critical staff assistants are, but I think that they're undervaluing, quite frankly, those 10 ambulances. I think you saw from the public the other day how they understand the issue. I think the importance of having that staffing in those ambulances in their district. I want to clarify a couple of things very quickly, too. The 12 peak hours that the fire department keeps referring to, those are not the hours that the ambulances would be in service. Rather, they'd be in service at the beginning of the shift in the morning and for 12 hours, meaning 6:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night. That's our agreement regarding the staffing of ambulances. We do that. We insist on that. That's the shift that we work, in other words. The 12-hour shift that firefighters work is from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. The reason for that is safety. We want our members to be able to get home and to get a full night's sleep before they get up and come to work the next day. Typically, these are the guys that are in between shifts, and we don't want them to have a shift that's from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and an hour and a half commute home and no sleep and no ability to be fresh for the next day's shift because of the kinds of duties that they do. So you need to understand that as well. You're not going to capture the most runs that way. What I would argue to you is that what we ought to be looking for, if we're looking for $3 million in savings or to balance our budget or to help with the further decline in revenue this year, that we ought to very quickly raise ambulance billing. I've been arguing for a $40 million raise of ambulance billing fees. I realize that's a heavy lift and that's being worked on. But we could very easily and quickly raise ambulance billing by $100 per transport, more in line with the county. The work on that is already done. I think that's ready to go, and that would raise...
We've already done that.
I don't believe so. I've been talking to our...
We did it. We did it.
I don't think it's happened yet.
Yeah. No,
The billing doesn't go into effect overnight, but the policy decision's been made, right?
Yeah.
$1,500 to transport and a fee to go to the scene and give you a Band-Aid.
So it's in the process now, and it'll raise $3 million. My point, by the way, on ambulance is please keep in mind that the actual savings in this ambulance proposal, this nighttime closure of 10 ambulances, is only $1.2 million. Whether or not we close ambulances in the coming year, or lose staff assistance, or do both, or do neither, you're still going to have the savings of not hiring firefighters next year, not running drill tower classes through, and taking the staff at the drill tower right now and transferring them back to the field. You're going to do that either way. So please understand that the actual savings regarding ambulances is $1.2 million only. So I think it would be penny wise and pound foolish and cost lives in the city were we to go that route. So please don't do either. Don't ask us to make Sophie's choice. We need staff assistance in their duties, and I believe we and you need those ambulances out there in your districts.
How long have we had citywide ambulances? It hasn't always been the case at every station.
No, as the call load has grown over the years, you've added resources over the years, and it was probably 5 or 6 years ago you made a commitment to the citizens of Los Angeles to say that every neighborhood was important, and we'd have an ambulance in every neighborhood fire station in the city.
So how long has it been, though?
5 or 6 years.
Okay. And on the 800 ambulances, are they on overtime or regular time?
The way that the chief is proposing doing this is converting them to overtime only. Right now, they're staffed straight time, 24 hours a day, full time.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the discussion. Any closing remarks, June or Mark?
Did you want us to provide
I was going
follow-up
to give you
information?
instructions, yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I would recommend the instructions be as follows then, that we attach the file, the information given by the fire department and the CLA's office to the HON motion, which has a file number, that we send it to council without recommendation of this committee for further review, that we look to the date of April 20th or 21st. Would that be
Sorry, Councilman, the fire department's information, you mean
their presentation?
they have okay, I'll need a copy of that.
Get a printed copy for the file, and June's report to the file. And when it comes to council, we'll obviously have them make this presentation again. And April 20th or 21st, would that be fine for everybody?
And there were questions that we asked if they could come
Yeah,
back.
and I was going to have them then add the additional information from the questions we requested.
Just as a matter of process, to be advised, this is a verbal report, so there's no action you can take today. When these reports come into my office, they could be waived out of committee, and I could put them in council on the 20th or 21st.
Well, what I'm saying is you already got a council file number in the HON motion.
Right.
So we'll attach this information to the HON motion.
Sure.
So that should clear that process.
That would still require a waiver, though, of that information to go to council.
Okay, it's been
I'll work with Doug to make sure that
It's
happens.
waived.
Okay.
All right. And then one last thing, Chief, if you would, to those council districts that are affected by this, would you offer an opportunity to take your presentation to the neighborhood council meetings? Because I, for one, got a lot of feedback from neighborhood councils, where one of your firefighters is a member of the board. So they want to hear this. I think they need to hear this presentation. If the council member so chooses, I will afford you that opportunity, ask if you do that. So that, if that's the case, that'll be the recommendation. Seeing no opposition, that's the recommendation. Thank you very much for all of your work. Appreciate it very much. That brings us to public comment. We have 2 public comments. Some guy named Don Frazier and Phyllis Doherty.
Council, I'd like to announce that on the 19th of
January?
January 19th?
Excuse me, April. We'll be doing a earthquake exercise, and we'll invite the committee as well as the council to participate. The best place to view this exercise would be Fire Station 88 in Division 3 of the San Fernando Valley.
Okay. And I already spoke to Mr. Zine, the others have already left, but I'll speak to the committee about adjourning the committee for that day and having just a field trip for the committee. And then I for sure will be there with Mr. Zine, I'm sure.
Starts at 8:30?
Yeah, 8:30 is the kickoff time. Most of the mornings and afternoons.
Yeah. So we appreciate that and we'll look forward to it, and it's very timely, obviously. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Ms. Doherty.
Thank you. I'll be very brief, of course. Thank you. I just want to mention one thing quickly to you that came up earlier, and I did not want to dispute anyone, but the 501c3 issue. The 501c3 is strictly federal. They do not check on your local status at all. You're required annually to report. Now they ask for an annual filing, but that's only the last 2 years. Your corporate is every 2 years, and you file to the Attorney General's office. There is no interaction. I know people that have had a suspended corporation for years. They still have their 501c3 status. So it's just really important that that's clear for you.
Actually, in the city of LA, they file for the 501c3, but there's also a filing that takes place with the state Secretary of State and the city of Los Angeles Police Department must be notified if you're going to raise money in the city of LA.
Yeah, if you're doing a specific event. If you're not doing a specific event that involves the city, you don't. So
No.
Yeah.
Any fundraising of any charity in the city of LA must register with the police department and get a permit.
There's no instruction on that
Yeah,
for anybody.
It's the law.
Yeah, none of us
If you know somebody that isn't doing that, they are not following the law.
Yeah, there's never ever been an instruction for that. But in terms of if you do something wrong here, it does not affect your 501c3. That's what I'm saying. They don't report it. They don't monitor it at all. I'm back on the administrative citation thing. I'm sorry, but this is the notice that they leave right now. This is called just a personal citation. This is all that the department uses. On the back, there's no way to get your bail information. There's no way to find out what you owe. You cannot determine only after the amount of bail which may be deposited can be determined only after personal presentation. It cannot be obtained by telephone letter or from the citing officer. Checks cannot be accepted. So it really means nothing. Then you have, of course, you get to court, and there's a bail schedule for your off-leash dog.
And that's because we don't set bail, courts do. And so we don't print that on personal service citations, only on parking citation, which is a municipal code violation.
Yeah, I understand that. But and then if it goes back to the city attorney because you failed to appear, which it usually does if your chihuahua was off leash, it costs us, from what I understand, a total of about $900 by the time you figure in everything to get back to the same thing where we have had no option to address the issue, the fact that the chihuahua can cause a traffic accident just as much as another car can and cost someone their life. So now we're doing everything with administrative citations. Our municipal code sections are being written that way. And the Department of Animal Services estimated that we could take in $2 million a year just doing what we're doing now. But, of course, it will increase because now they will be able to address things. The rooster ordinance, we can't enforce that because we don't have the administrative citation process, which we wrote into that ordinance so that we wouldn't have to be sending those people to jail for one extra rooster. And they say, well, we can write a letter, but that's like saying to somebody in the midst of a burglary, hold that thought because we're going to write to you. So that's the situation that the department is now in. And this was August 10. And all it was is that the board recommended that the city administrative officer, chief legislative analyst, and other city agencies as appropriate undertake the development and implementation of an administrative citation program for the Department of Animal Services or other city departments. It still hasn't been heard by your committee, and so it's still not going anywhere yet. The CAO's representative is attending every commission meeting and sitting there for the 4 or 5 hours. So it's totally stopped. So now they can't really use these on most everything, and yet we can't use what we have in the new municipal code sections. So I just I don't know if they really made that clear to you. So I'm hoping that you can hear this. I know the CAO is busy, but they're not, I know they are doing other things besides budget.
Okay, we can make a notation, let's ask the department what's happening there, okay? And if it requires then a motion to get back here, we'll do that.
You already have it. It's already waiting. It's for your department, for your committee since August 26th. This was assigned to your committee, August 26th of last year.
That doesn't appear on any printout I've seen. Have you seen it on the printout of things waiting?
I know it's in our council files pending public safety.
Okay.
Yeah. And Mr. Weiss never heard it, so that's why I was hoping that
we will.
You guys.
Well, let's schedule it for. We should do it before the budget hearings begin. So the next, if we not next week, and we skip the 19th and the 26th or something, we'll see if we can get on the calendar.
Thank you. They've already worked out the details on it. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Meeting's adjourned.